Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is the first in a series that I want to start here on my channel. I've decided that once I complete reading an entire backlist from some of my favorite and most read authors, that I want to dedicate a video entirely to them as an author and all of their books. So today the author I'm going to be talking about is Riley Sager. Riley Sager is one of my favorite thriller authors. He's written 9 books and I just completed his entire backlist as of last week. So I knew I wanted to film this video very soon after that. Basically, I'm going to go through, give you guys an overview of Riley Sager, his books, his writing style, what you can kind of expect and why I enjoy reading from him. And then I'm going to go in publication date order and give you guys a brief spoiler-free synopsis of each one of his books. And then I'm going to rank each of his books from my least to most favorite and share all my thoughts and opinions on them. So with that, let's jump right in. Riley Sager is one of my favorite thriller authors. He is an auto-buy author for me. Obviously, I read everything that he writes. I feel like each one of Riley Sager's books feels quite different because each of his premises are so unique. He has very distinct settings. So when you read his books, you can hear his voice come through in his writing style and you can tell it's a Riley Sager book, but it never feels too samey. I never feel like one book feels very similar to another, which I really love because I kind of know what to expect when I'm going into his books, but I know that it's going to be something unique and take twists and turns that I'm not expecting and just give off a totally different vibe. So kind of same but different is the vibe of his books. To me, when I'm reading a Riley Sager book, everything comes to life and jumps off the page and I can visualize everything so well. It's honestly like the book version of watching a scary movie, which I just love. Another thing that I feel sets Riley Sager apart from other thriller authors is oftentimes I feel thrillers focus on the plot and the storyline and the shock factor and the twists and turns. And usually the characters are an afterthought and kind of pushed to the back burner. There's not a whole lot of character development. Often there's a lot of unlikable characters. And to be fair, I feel like you don't go into a thriller expecting to find a new favorite protagonist. But I do think Riley Sager writes a really well-rounded thriller and that the characters are strong, the plot is strong, there's twists and turns, the setting is unique and atmospheric, and I just love all of his books for all of those reasons. So let's jump into talking about each one. Starting with his debut novel, which is actually the most recent book that I just finished up from him. This book follows 3 women who were deemed final girls because they were the sole survivors in different massacres. In this book, we're following Quincy, Sam, and Lisa, who are all final girls. The story is told through Quincy's perspective, and at the beginning of the book, Lisa has been found dead. So because of this tragedy, Quincy and Sam end up connecting, and the more time goes on, the more details are uncovered. Quincy starts to question what actually happened to Lisa, what really happened the night of the massacre she was involved in, and who she can actually trust. The next release of his is The Last Time I Lied. This one is set at a summer camp following our main character Emma in 2 different timelines. We follow a past timeline in the 80s when Emma was a camper at this summer camp, and when she was there, her 3 cabin mates ended up going missing and just kind of vanished and were never found again. And then in present day, Emma is being asked to return to this camp as a counselor, and she decides to go back because she feels like it will give her some closure and some answers that she's kind of been seeking. But when she returns, the same thing happens again and 3 other people go missing. So we follow Emma as she's trying to uncover what's going on in the present as well as what happened in the 80s when she was a camper at this summer camp. The next release of Riley Sager's is Lock Every Door. This book follows our main character Jules, who ends up taking this apartment sitting job at this infamous apartment building in New York City called the Bartholomew. And there's all kinds of stories about some of the weird things that go on at the Bartholomew, but Jules is kind of desperate for a job, so she really needs the money and ends up taking it despite some of the stories that she hears. When Jules is there, she ends up befriending another apartment sitter named Ingrid. However, the next day, Ingrid ends up disappearing, so Jules starts to uncover some of the dark secrets about what might actually be happening at the Bartholomew. Then we have Home Before Dark. This book follows our main character Maggie, and when Maggie was a very young girl, she lived in this house with her parents parents, and they ended up having to flee and escape the house because supposedly it was haunted. And her father went on to write this best-selling book about what happened when they stayed in this house and some of the things that occurred there. A lot of people are skeptical about the book and think that it's all made up, but Maggie was honestly too young to remember either way. So now in present day, Maggie's father has actually passed away and has left this supposedly haunted house to Maggie. So when Maggie returns there to kind of renovate the house and get it ready to sell, she ends up finding out for herself if her father's book was fact or fiction. Then we have Survive the Night. This one follows our main character, Charlie. It's set in the 90s on this college campus, and there is a serial killer afoot. So Charlie decides she needs to get out of there and go home. She ends up getting a ride with a stranger who she meets through her college's ride board, and while she's in the car with him over the course of this one night traveling back home, some weird things start happening that make her question that this stranger who she just got in the car with might actually be this serial killer on her college campus. Then we have The House Across the Lake. This one follows this recently widowed actress named Casey, and Casey is really going through it. She's been in the midst of some bad press, so she decides she needs to get away for a bit, and she ends up going to stay in her lake house. And when she's there, she sees that a new couple has recently moved in the house across the lake, and so Casey finds some binoculars and ends up passing the time by spying on this couple. The wife in this couple is this famous supermodel named Kate, and the husband is this big tech guy named Tom. And the more Casey starts spying on them, she sees that their marriage isn't as perfect as it may come across, and they definitely have some struggles and things going on. A couple days later, the wife Catherine goes missing, and Casey becomes very invested trying to find out what happened to her. Then we have The Only One Left. This one takes place in this isolated Gothic mansion. We're following this woman named Lenora, who back in the day was accused of murdering her entire family. Now in Lenora's older age, she has had a few strokes, so she is mute and not really mobile, so she is in need of a caretaker. That's where our main character Kit comes in to take care of Lenora. Lenora ends up communicating to Kit through this old typewriter, and she ends up writing her a message saying she wants to tell her everything about what really happened surrounding her family's massacre. Then we have Middle of the Night. This one follows our main character Ethan. This is the first of his books that doesn't follow a female protagonist. We follow Ethan in two different timelines. One when he was a young boy and he was in his backyard camping out overnight with his good friend and neighbor Billy. And when he woke up the next morning, he looks over and Billy is gone. He's vanished, and Billy was never found. His case has become a cold case. So we flash to the present. Ethan is actually going back to his childhood home for a bit, and when he's there, weird things start happening again, and he decides he wants to really find out the truth about what happened to his friend Billy. Then we have With a Vengeance. This is Riley Sager's most recent release from this year. It takes place in the 1940s, and the whole thing is set on this train over one night going from Philadelphia to Chicago. We follow our main character Anna, who lures 6 different people onto this train under false pretenses, and they have all wronged her and her family in some way, so she wants to get justice for her and her family. However, Anna's plan ends up getting derailed when one of the passengers is murdered, so now she's trying to figure out who amongst them could be a killer. Now to give you guys my personal rankings and all my thoughts and opinions from least to most favorite. My least favorite book of Riley Sager's, and really the only one I would say that I don't care for, is Survive the Night. For me, this setting of them being in this car over the course of one night, I thought was going to be so tense and build so much suspense and make me on the edge of my seat, but it really had the opposite effect. I feel like there was only so much that could be done in this car over the course of one night with these two characters. I swear there would be like 10 pages worth describing the way Charlie would buckle her seatbelt or how she was looking out the window. So to me, it just was very slow and really dragged. Also, our main character is a very unreliable narrator, and she does this thing where she dissociates and she calls it a movie in her mind. So it's like, you know, when you're watching a movie and there's this one scene and it just gets crazier and crazier and it's just so out there where you're like, oh, this has to be a dream. It would be so many scenes like that, but it was just over and over that it got to be so repetitive, and I honestly felt like it took away from the suspense, because anything that would happen, I would be like, oh, well, this might not even be real. This might just be another movie in her mind. So it got to be a little bit annoying for me personally, but it also was kind of funny. And in some ways it was fun. It did read like a cheesy, scary movie where you're like yelling at the characters because they're just making such dumb decisions. But to me, it just didn't gonna work because of this setting. There wasn't really much I felt could be done in this car over the course of one night. It took away from the suspense for me personally and just got very repetitive. So that's why this is my least favorite of Riley Sager's, and I feel that is a pretty common opinion. I don't know too many people who enjoyed this book too much. I feel this is one of his lowest rated and least favorite books amongst his readers. My next least favorite is Lock Every Door. This one had so many things that I did enjoy about it. I loved this New York setting. I liked the spooky apartment building. I found Jules to be a very fascinating main character and I liked following her. It's a very fast-paced read. All the chapters in this book are super short and almost all of them end on a cliffhanger. So it read super quickly, but by the time we got to the 50% mark, I could completely guess what was going to happen in this book. I was so hoping that I was going to be wrong and that this book would take me by surprise, but every little clue that was dropped after that just kind of confirmed my suspicions, and I did end up predicting the big reveal. I will say a big factor in that is I watched a movie not too long before reading this book that had the exact same twist, so I definitely think that played a factor into me being able to predict this book. I would say in general it's not necessarily something super predictable. I had just so happened to see something with the same twist, so that's why I was able to guess what was coming. Also, another thing that I recently remembered in preparing for this video is there is something mentioned at the beginning that kind of plays a factor in our main character's life that I thought was going to be revealed at the end and just kind of tie into everything, but that part of the story was left unanswered and that really bothered me. I feel like that could have played into the plot twist, so I didn't like that that part didn't get wrapped up. I feel that's the only Riley Sager book that's kind of left an unanswered question for me, but take my review with a grain of salt because I do feel this is one of Riley Sager's fan favorites. I know so many people love this one. It was actually the first of his books that I ever read because I'd heard so many great reviews for it, so it was enjoyable, but again, I think I just so happened to pick this one up at the wrong time, and I think had I not watched something with the same exact twist prior to reading it, I would have enjoyed it even more. Then I'm gonna put his most recent release, which I just read a few weeks ago, With a Vengeance. I really enjoyed the setting and the vibes of this one. It felt very atmospheric to me, but I kind of went in thinking I would know where this was going, and it did kind of end up going where I predicted. I also feel like this one has a similar thing to Survive the Night that was a big critique for me, where the whole thing takes place on this train and there's very limited characters. So I didn't feel this one could go too many ways. I felt like it was kind of limited in what could happen with this setting and with a very small cast of characters. I also didn't get super invested in this one. I feel like the storyline has been one of my least favorites of Riley Sager's. I didn't really connect to any of the characters. I don't know if the time period played a factor into that, although to me it didn't really read super old-fashioned, like the way they spoke and everything. It could have honestly been a contemporary book if I hadn't known the setting was supposed to be the 1940s, but there was just a bit of a disconnect for me that I didn't get super pulled into this one. I also feel like the reveal was just a little bit messy and all over the place. Like honestly, if you told me to spoil this book for you right now, I couldn't even tell you what happened because I really don't remember. The reveal just kind of went in a bunch of different directions and it did kind of lose me a little bit. So things I liked about this one, but overall one of my least favorites of his. A little above that, I would put Final Girls, my most recent read of Riley Sager's. This one I just felt so much frustration with our main character. She was putting herself in so many bad situations and making so many stupid decisions, and not to victim blame, but it came to a point where I was like, girl, how can you do this or put yourself in this scenario and not expect bad things to happen? Like it was just mind-boggling to me, to the point where I was like, there is no way this girl is a final girl. How is she the sole survivor of a massacre? Because she's kind of an idiot in a lot of ways. The story did keep me thoroughly entertained though all the way through. I halfway guessed what was going on, but it ended up not being exactly how I thought it would be, and I really liked how the ending kind of reeled things back in and tied everything up in a nice little bow. There were some things that I was like, okay, I don't know how this is gonna get resolved, and it ended up working out really nicely. So overall, I did enjoy this one. Just a lot of frustration with our main character. Then I would put the only one left above that. This is one that I didn't rate super highly. I think I rated it like 3.75 stars, but looking back on it, I think of it more fondly than I think I did at the time. I really love the setting of this one. I love this gothic creepy mansion. A lot of characters, I had so many predictions, but I do think there was so much build up to the story that I spent a lot of time reading, kind of waiting for something to happen, and I feel like there was just so much background, so much lead up, and it did end up taking so many twists and turns. I thought they were all done really well too, and I thought the ending tied things together really nicely. Another thing with this one too is there really weren't any characters that I liked. I felt like any of them could have been the bad guy at any point, so there was no one I was especially rooting for or thinking would be the good guy in the story. So I think part of that kept me not as invested, but overall I did have a good time with this one, and it kept me guessing, and the twist really twisted in this book. Now we're moving into my favorite Riley Sager books. These are really the ones that I have no notes on and I thoroughly enjoyed, so not too many critiques from here on out. Starting with Middle of the Night, I loved this one. First off, the setting, I loved this suburban summertime setting. I thought it was done really, really well. It felt very nostalgic and kind of eerie to me. This is also the first of Riley Sager's books that has a male main character, and I believe it's also the first of his books that give us multiple perspectives, told in third person, but it did kind of give a full picture to what was going on. We got some different people in this neighborhood's point of view that really added a lot of layers to the story, and I loved how it was done. This is one of Riley Sager's more slower paced books, but I don't say that in a negative way at all. It just wasn't as action-packed. We spent a lot of time in our main character Ethan's head, just getting all of his thoughts, and I really enjoyed that, honestly. I liked getting his thought process, learning about what he was thinking, and kind of taking it day by day, trying to uncover what happened to his best friend Billy. I was really invested in this one. The whole time I was reading, I was like, I need to know what happened to Billy. What's gonna happen? I have no clue where this is going. It was also one that when I put it down, I could not stop thinking about it, and again, I just needed to get back into the story to find out what happened to Billy. The ending I also thought was so good. Half of it I did predict, but the other half I never in a million years could have guessed like the way it happened, and I just thought it wrapped up so nicely. It was the perfect length. It wasn't too dragged out, but it wasn't rushed either. I just had a really great time with this one overall. In third place, I would put The House Across the Lake, which is kind of a hot take. This one gets very mixed reviews. Reason being, not because people don't like the storyline or the characters. It comes down to the big reveal and plot twist in this book, and I can totally see where it wouldn't work for a lot of people because it is very over the top. It is quite ridiculous, but for some reason it just worked for me, and I thought it was done really, really well, and I had such a fun time with it. This was one where I got really invested in the characters, and I also was so invested in knowing what happened to Catherine. I was like on the edge of my seat the same way I was in Middle of the Night. When I put this one down, I was like, I just need to know what happened to Catherine. I was so in it with our main character Casey, and I just really enjoyed her. I thought she was a very complex character, and this book definitely took a direction I was not expecting, but again, I had such a fun time with it. I think this is such a perfect fall read too, because although it's set at the lake, it takes place in the month of October in Vermont, and the fall foliage is constantly mentioned. So just a very atmospheric one that I had a really fun time following the characters and the storyline, and I really liked this crazy plot twist. My second favorite of Riley Sager's is The Last Time I Lied. This one I think is one of my favorite settings of his. I just loved this summer camp setting, especially our past timeline in the 80s. It was so fun to read about. It reminded me a lot of that American Horror Story 80s summer camp season. It was giving the same vibes. I feel like this book of Riley Sager's has some of his most well-developed characters with really great arcs. This is also one that I had absolutely no idea where it was going. It kept me guessing until the very last page, and I think this is one of the only books of his that I did not predict the plot twist in any way. I think in a lot of his books I predict a part of the plot twist, like the who or the how or the why, but I don't guess the whole thing. In this one, I didn't guess a single part of it, and you truly don't know the full story until the very last page. It kept me guessing. I just loved it. It had me questioning who I could trust, what really happened the whole way through. Such a good time, and I think this is the perfect thriller to read during the summer. Okay, and then drum roll please for my very favorite book of Riley Sager's, which Process of Elimination, you might already know. Home Before Dark Dark is by far my favorite of his books. Such a good, creepy, spooky haunted house story. The perfect book to read during the fall time. I actually read this book when I was home alone for an extended period of time, and I was getting so creeped out. Any noise that I would hear in my house, I was constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling like there was someone watching me while I was reading this. It had so many jump scare moments. Another thing that I absolutely loved about this book so much is that it's a book within a book, and our past timeline that we get in here is the father's book that he wrote about this haunted house. So you're kind of seeing what he wrote about, what he claimed went on in the past as our actual past timeline of the story. And I loved getting to like read his book in here to kind of like see for myself what it was like through his eyes, and then also of course following our main character Maggie in the present. And then it was fun because what was going on in our past chapter would kind of come back up in the present, and to get Maggie's take on it and what was actually going on. I just had such a good time with this one. Such a good haunted house story. I think back on this book so fondly all the time. I recommend it all the time. Anytime someone wants a thriller rec, a haunted house rec, a fall book rec, this comes top of mind as being one of my favorites, and I feel like it is so widely beloved as well. I know this is a favorite of Riley Sager's for a lot of people. It just had absolutely everything that I want in a thriller. So that is my guide to Riley Sager and all of his books. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. If you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up. Let me know down below in the comments if you have read from Riley Sager before, what your thoughts are on him and all of his books. Give me your ranking too on the books of his that you've read. I would love to compare our rankings. Also let me know if you're planning on picking up any of his books after watching this. That is definitely the goal with these kinds of videos, and I'm excited to make this a series on my channel. I have a few other authors that I'm planning on doing this for. I'm working on completing their backlist next, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you are subscribed if you're not already so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I hope to see you guys all very soon in my next one. Bye guys.